Hello everyone. Today we are going to deal with authority files, and more specifically, what is the point of authority files and how do I go about updating, and why do I have to update authority files, and are they necessary? Are they relevant? What's the point of an authority file? Okay, now an authority file is a field of information within the system that has a list for you to choose from, and most times can you expand that list with your own options. That's what an authority file is. It's there so that, let's take an example of media type. Okay, so when you go in to define a catalog record, one of the fields that you can define is what kind of media it is. As an example, it could be a book, it could be a fiction record, it could be a non-fiction record, it can be a lesson, it can be a TV program, it can be a website, it could be non-fiction, it could be teacher's reference. That is an authority file. Not those words, but those words relate to the authority file of media. Okay, so in Smart Suite, when you go onto a field of information and when you click that field of information and it produces a list, that is an authority file. Well, what authority file is it? In this case, it's the media authority file. So let's go and have a look at authors. So when I click on authors and I click in the author to enter an author's name, if it produces a list, that's the author authority file. And if I go into subject and I click on here to enter a subject, that's a subject authority file. Okay, and of course, if you type in the first character, so I'll type in M, it'll zoom into the M's and then it'll start listing from the M. Okay, so you can go and add, select something from an authority file. Authority files become very, very important to the end user, to the library staff and the managers of the system, not so much in the catalog entry, but in the copy area. Very, very important. So when you're talking about catalog and you're talking about copies, okay, so in the copy area, we have a status, and the status is, there they are. We have locations, and there's all the locations. We have sublocations, okay, and there's all the sublocations. We have loan types, and there's all the loan types. So all of these are different authority files. So it's a copy status authority file, a location authority file, a sublocation authority file, a loan types authority file, a renewal type. So you have many, many, many authority records. So remember always, if a list comes down, it's an authority file. Okay, so let's have a look at the patron record. So these authority entries here are very important. You could almost get away with not worrying about all the other authority entries, but these one, the copy status, the location, the sublocation, and in particular the loan type and the renewal type, these are all authority files. Now let's have a look at the patron side. Do the patron records have authority files? And yes, they do. And not only do they have authority files, but just like in the catalog record, you had an authority file for the loan type, the renewal type. In here, in the patron record, there's three very, very important authority files. So you have the class grade. When you click here, these should be all your year levels. Okay, and if a person doesn't have a class grade, they're not going to be able to borrow. You have a homeroom. The homeroom is only used to produce reports. So it's a way of classifying the users. So he might be in year 11, but he's in the year 11C group, or the year 11B group, or the year 11 Mrs. Smith group, or whatever. Okay, so those are the two authority files. Another very important authority file is the role. So when you click in the role, these are all the roles you can have. So library staff, if you are creating users on your system for the library, make sure that everybody has a role of a student. Very, very important. And You can have more than one entry. My recommendation on the patron side of it is to just click to one. So if it's a student, make sure it's a student. If it's a teacher, then what you might want to do is you might want to go down and click it as a teacher. Okay, don't give them a student, get rid of that. So if it's a teacher, make it a teacher. However, if it is, clicking here again, a library staff member, make them a librarian. Okay, and of course, if they are an administrator, make them administrator. Okay, so let me just go and add student here for a moment and explain them. Okay, a student can only search and reserve books. A teacher can do all of the above, but they can also add digital content from TV for education to the system. They can request lessons or content on any topic or any subject or any curriculum outcome or any Foxtel program or any TV program that they need to have to be able to teach. That's what the teacher's role gives them. Okay, and of course the librarian role will basically give them access to 95% of all these menu items. All the others won't have them. Okay, so they can catalog, they can search, they can report, they can import patrons. There's a heap of stuff they can do. The administrator is a little bit higher than a librarian. The administrator can lock people out, so can the librarian, but they can even lock the librarian out if they needed to. Okay, they can change the layout of the screen, the pages, the colors, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, but they're all authority files. Now, let me demonstrate two kinds of authority files. All the authority files have two types of authority files. So let's do with the homeroom. Okay, so I click here and I'm going to add first of all, let's get rid of 11C. Okay, so I need to put an entry in here. So if I click in here and Mike's class, okay, and of course there is no Mike's class. However, if I click that plus sign, it'll say Mike's class is a new homeroom. Are you sure you want to add it? And I go, yep. And that's it. So basically, I didn't have to go to a little utility somewhere and find where the authority files are and then find the homeroom and then go and add it in there, then come back into my patron record and then select it out of that list. So you could have added it on the fly, and that applies for probably 95% of all the authority files in the system. You don't have to go into the system's menu to be able to create a new entry in the authority file so that you can add it to the patron record or the catalog record. So as an example, you might be cataloging a book and there's an author called Michael Fernandez, and when you try to put it in, it's not on the list of authors already in the authority file. So what the system will say, oh, well, I'm going to add it. Are you okay with that? And you go, yep. It adds it into the authority file so everybody else can now use that entry and will also add it into your record. So that's one kind of authority file. So most 95% of all of our authority files are dynamic. The other kind of authority file, I'm going to use class grade as an example. Okay, so have a look at class grade. It's a year 11. Okay, and it has a loan limit, an overdue limit, a reserve limit, an availability limit, and it has other things like their final borrowing date, their due date, and whatever. So we're now going to create a new class grade authority file. So when let's get rid of the 11 first, okay, and I'll click here, and now I type in Michael's class, okay, and you can see Michael's class doesn't exist, so I'm going to click the plus sign to add it, and it says Michael's class is a new class grade. Are you sure you want to add it? You go, okay. And there you go. You've created the homeroom called Michael's class, and you created a class grade called Michael's class. However, the difference between these two is this particular authority file, the class grade, requires you to set up their loan limit, their overdue limit, their reserve limit, and the expiry date and the final borrowing date and all these other parameters. All that's done is just created it. So you need to now go into the authority file utility and call up Michael's class and allocate all these parameters. So there are two kinds of authority entries. One where it's just standalone, needs nothing. The other one is, no, that's just an entry. That's only the beginning. You need to now add all this other stuff. So what we're going to show you is, how do I do it? How do I go to the utility that will allow me to go in and add all the additional parameters to any authority file that requires them? So we're going to now go in and we're going to look at the homeroom and see if they need additional parameters. Then we're going to go into the class grade and see if they need additional parameters, so you can distinguish and recognize the two. So if ever you want to go to the utility to address any authority file, you didn't have to put the homeroom of Mike's class here. You could have gone into the utility, created Mike's class, saved it, exited out, and then come into the patron record and then pick Mike's class off the list. Okay, you could have done it that way. Much faster to do it dynamically here. So to get into the authority file utility, you have to be at least a librarian. Okay, if you're not a librarian, then you're or an administrator, you're not going to be able to do this. So let's I'll save this record. Okay, save it. Okay, so here we go. Menu, and I'll go in by the way, let me just go and refresh this Mike Smith. Okay, let's bring up Mike Smith again. So we go and find M-I-K-E, Mike. So let's go to Mike Smith. That's the record here. All right, so there's Mike Smith. I'm just showing you that it's all saved here. Now, when I click in the menu button here, I need to go down to configuration and then the authority editor. Okay, and this is where all authority entries are created, managed, deleted, change the spelling, fix up the authority files, whatever. This is the authority file editor, and it will always come up as audience, simply because that's an alphabetic list. So if I click that, there's all my authority entries. Okay, but I'm interested in the homeroom. Homeroom, and here's all my list of authority entries. And don't assume that's it. So I've got a scroll bar that is telling me that there's more. So I can scroll, 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 scroll. And we're going to go to what happened? Homeroom. Oh, I didn't save it. It didn't get saved, even though it told me it was saving it. It didn't get saved. But Mike's class is not in this homeroom list. So I would want to create it in this list. So if you want to create it, you just go in here, Mike's class, and then you just click the plus sign. When you click the plus sign, guess what? Scroll, 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 and then right up, and there's Mike's class. Okay, so if I want to have a look at Mike's class, every one of these authority entries have a little pencil to say edit. So I'll click on that, and you can see there's nothing else to do. It's just a name, and that's it. So you can choose it off a list, and that's all the homeroom requires. Okay, all right. Now let's go and have a look at another authority entry, which is the class grade. So when I come down to class grade, click on that, and let's go and click on Mike's class, because I didn't save the record. So Mike's class, that's what I'm going to call it. Okay, I'm going to add that to the list. So there's Mike's class grade. That's the authority entry. If I have a click on the edit of it and say, you need to have a security level, you need to have a final borrowing date, you need to have an expiry date, you need to have how many books they can borrow, how long they can borrow it for, you need to have how many times they can renew a book or how many renewals they can do on the web, and if they renewed it, what's the renewal period? It's 14 days. Can they reserve books on the web? Yep, they can reserve only 2 books. That stops them from reserving everything. Can they have multiple copies of the same book? So in other words, they left their book at home, so they're just going to come and take another copy. We go, by default, that should be no, you cannot. Only teachers should be allowed to have multiple copies. Okay? And patron override. So what does that mean? So basically, if someone in Mike's class came to borrow a book and their loan limit was, say, 14 days, okay, and they came to borrow a book, then if it was a normal 14-day loan, they'll get it for 14 days. But let's say this is a teacher and they don't borrow for 14 days, they borrow for a year, 365 days. Now, if they come to borrow a book that is 14 days, because it'll play it safe and say, no, always loan to whatever the lowest value. So if the book is a 14-day loan, give it to them for 14 days, not 365 days. So you can say, no, the patron will always override the book limit. So if they come to borrow a 14-day book, they'll get it for 365 days. If they come to borrow a 90-day term loan, it'll give it to them for 365 days. If they come to borrow an overnight loan, it'll give it to them for 365 days, because you said the patron can override, and that's what it's all about. Okay, now you click save, and then that'll save it for you. I'm not going to save it, okay, because I'm going to delete that entry after this session. Now, remember we were talking about copies, and in the copies area we were talking about loan type, and we were talking about renewal type. So let's have a look at the loan type authority file. So here's a loan type authority file. So I can create a new loan type called Mrs. Smith's class loans. So when I click that, and if I click the pencil, okay, I need to tell it what that means. Mrs. Smith's class loans might be a 90-day loan, might be a 45-day loan. So basically, you will go ahead and you will put in the loan period and the final borrowing date for that group as well, if necessary, and you just click save. You only hit the delete if you don't want that anymore. Don't worry about the global change. You'll never deal with that. Okay? And that's all there is to authority files and how simple and easy it is. So why don't you go in here and have a look of what all the different authority files are and what they do. You'll be pleasantly happy. If you're a TV for Education user, this one will interest you no end. It's fantastic. The default video security. So in other words, if you're going to be adding videos from TV for Education to the collection, what does this do? Well, what that says, if it's a G-rated video, make it a security 0 so everyone can borrow. If it's an M-rated video, make sure that year 9s and above can borrow it. If it's an MA video, make sure year 12s and above can borrow it. If it's a PG video, year 6 and above can borrow it. If it's an R-rated video, only administrators, okay? And if it's a CTC, don't ask me what that means, but there are some videos that are classified as CTC. That means only teachers can borrow it. So that's a pretty powerful authority entry. It's called the default video security. Thank you very much for participating in this Fun with Authority Files training